You want to do our introduction?
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Whitaker. This is the Wobbegongs with our final book club, Hey Kiddo, by Jared K. I'm not pronouncing that last name, so. But yeah, welcome in. So.
All right, I'll head out first. So, the book kind of gives like a kind of behind the scenes of his memoir, and what it was like growing up for him, and it shed kind of a light on like loss and gain with family and forgiving family, kind of moving forward. So, why do you think the author wrote his memoirs in a graphic novel and not just a regular biography? Like, what difference would that have?
You just stole my question.
I'm sorry.
I have a question just like that.
So I think that obviously, you know, one thing that he says throughout the book is that art kind of helped him cope and survive. You know, that was one of the quotes of the book, that like he survived because of that. And so I think that that's it, that he was able to, through that art, like because art is so important to him, he now needs to present that to other people and say like, hey, this is, it just makes it more authentic, you know, it makes it more him.
Yeah.
So.
One of my questions were actually about the pictures of the family documents that he included at the end of some of the chapters. And I think some of it was, my question was, were you going to believe, or did you think that those images were disruptive, or did they add to the meaning? So answering your question and kind of mine, I think that the pictures overall just added to the meaning of the overall story. I think it helped you kind of imagine the trials and tribulations that he went through as a child. But I think it just added a lot of depth to the story. And like Logan said, it's just like an art form that further engaged you into the novel.
Yeah, and I feel like especially if you're trying to target like a younger generation with that, if you just give them, okay, here's a biography, they might not be as interested in reading it versus like, you know, graphic novels are so big right now.
Do you think it like downplayed like the whole theme of addiction and stuff though, that he...
I think it could.
Like downplayed it in the sense of like, since it's more like geared towards children, do you think it kind of like softened the blow of a topic that strong?
Yeah, I think it could, because you can still talk about the importance of it and the awareness of it, but I guess depending on what age group you're trying to do, like trying to approach, doing it in that way would make it a little bit more easier to approach that situation, especially if it comes with like parents and stuff involved too.
Yeah, I think the images just made it more appropriate for the audience.
Kind of like if you're using Lion King to represent, what play was that?
Lion King?
Yeah.
To represent what?
It's a play. Anyways, look it up. I'll look it up. I'm trying to remember. But okay, you can go on.
So, and obviously we've already hit on it. My question was, how does the modality enhance the message? So, obviously what we just talked about of Jarrett choosing to do a graphic novel, how does that enhance what he's trying to say? How does the modality enhance the message? How does him using a graphic novel enhance exactly what his purpose is behind this book?
I think you get more of an imagery in that. Like I said, instead of just reading words on a page and trying to imagine it all, you kind of get to see it a little bit.
I think it, like aside from what we just said, I think it helped appeal to an audience that has not experienced those types of things. Like, I found it difficult to kind of resonate with some of the things going on because I had not had any firsthand experiences, but the modality kind of just enhanced the message through means of like, this is what it's like, this is the raw aspect of it. So I would just say it again, like it just deepened the meaning and the message, and it came across very appropriately without it being too harsh, maybe too harsh.
Oh, to answer that other question, Lion King, it was Hamlet.
Hamlet.
I was like, which one was it? No, you can use that as an analogy for teaching Hamlet with Lion King. But anyways,
Okay, so one of my questions, hang on, let me look. Marissa, you stole my first one.
Well, you said one though. You kind of added on to it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start with this one. So it's kind of a three-part question, but what do you think of the author's portrayal of his parents and grandparents? Did you like them? Could you sympathize with them? Were you like, what were your emotions towards them and their characters? Do your feelings matter? Does it play no role in your interpretation of the novel?
I would say right now in my placement, there's one student in my class who has who had a lot of similar things going on at home that were kind of discussed in this text, with the idea of like family coming in and out of your life, you know, lack of commitment, lack of, you know, love, consistent support and showing up. And there's also another student in the class next to me who dealt with drugs in the family, and I feel like I'm more partial towards like the child and what the child is feeling, just because in the child you see the effects of like what these issues have on like just the child in general, but just like on the family. When you have a child who is very young and it needs that like constant support, needs a figure in their life, needs love, and is kind of confused as to why they can't see their family often, why their family doesn't commit, why they're kind of, you know, like not getting the love that they need. It's very hard to witness, and it can affect how they perform in school. It can affect the relationships that they form. So I think I can sympathize with the family, I can sympathize with the grandparents, but I think I sympathize more with the child, just because it, like, all of the choices and decisions of the family it directly affects the child. So yeah.
While you were talking, I found there was a quote on page 137, and he said, "I was lucky not to be born addicted to heroin, and I was told that often." So I think just overall, like the decisions that his parents made directly affected him, even though he had no part in it. So just to answer my own question, I was really angry a majority of the time, because I just don't see how you could put those kinds of circumstances on a child.
Yeah.
But I'll let one of y'all go.
Can you
Did
read
you need-
the last part of your question?
Okay, so did you find them to be likable, or did you sympathize with them? Does that matter, or does it play no role in your interpretation of the novel?
Well, I think that like your feelings kind of guide your interpretation of the novel, and like same thing with like your experiences. So like as Anaya was talking, I was thinking like to make a cross reference in Enrique's journey, you know, and we kind of talked a little bit about this, Dr. Whitaker, when you were in here, with, you know, maybe kids growing up in different environments. You have some kids who they maybe experienced what's happened in that book. Then you have some kids who go home to parents who tell them that, you know, illegal immigrants are bad people and they shouldn't be doing that. And so that's going to change your perception of the events in the book, right? It goes from a hero story to like, oh, all this, you know, and these are bad people, you know. And so I think to kind of relate that back to this, you have certain people who would relate to the kid more, and I think obviously we all would, but then you also have people who maybe read the book and say, well, I mean, the kid got what's coming to him because he's, you know, his family's on drugs, and, you know, like his mom's just trash, you know, like that would be a perception potentially of someone reading the book. And so your feelings, but also your experiences have a lot to, you know, to do with how you interpret a book. So.
Okay. My first question is, like Enrique's journey, this book discusses the aspect of family and how it takes many forms. How do the two compare, especially with the themes of drugs and family? So I guess kind of like a short answer, I guess, going off of the discussion that we just had, I feel like Enrique's journey does a better job at like giving you the different perspectives of each family member. Meanwhile, like Hey Kiddo, it was just from the perspective of the kid. So we got to understand like Enrique, like how he formed those relationships with drugs and his complicated relationship with his mother and the other members of his family, like how it came to be. So I guess I was more like sympathetic. I could see why he got himself in that situation, but with Hey Kiddo, it was kind of more like I said, I'm more sympathetic to the child, I would say. So I think they both talk about drugs differently, but with family, like it's all heartbreaking during like both books, like just how, you know, you get yourself into situations and you can't get out of it, and it affects your family going forward.
Yeah, and adding to that, I think one of the things was like his mom had sent him a letter. She was like supportive of his art, and so you don't really see, I guess, necessarily like what's going on directly in her mind, because you see it from his perspective. So with her being supportive, you know, and having addiction, it's one of those like, does she, you know, she wants to be there, but like that's taking over, and you see that along with kind of, you know, his dad does come back for a little bit, but those implications that are behind why she does what she does, and you see how that affects the family in the book.
Yeah, I think to go a little bit back to Enrique's journey, like I think also you have maybe what I would gather is like two different purposes for the books. Like when I read Enrique's journey, for me, and this kind of going back off of the other question about perspectives and feelings, but for me, that feels like something that was written to help me to understand the whole picture, like we talked about, right? Like you said, where they give all perspectives involved. With this, especially with it being a memoir, I think that it's more pointed towards kids who are in this exact situation, you know, to where now a kid can read this and say, you know what, like I identify with that. Not saying that that can't happen in Enrique's journey, but I feel like Enrique's journey is more geared towards people like us who have never experienced that and can't understand that from all sides. So I think there's probably two different like purposes there, you know, and so that's why they're a little bit different.
And that one kind of leads into the next question I have. So in chapter 3, he talks about his first day at school when he's asked to draw his parents. He told the teacher he didn't have any, and he drew his grandparents instead. So I put, why do you think it's important to share the story? Why do you think it was important for him to share the story with his students? And just to continue on with that, I've kind of similar situation with, that's why I like this question, because like my son, from pre-K up until now he's in 2nd grade, when we go in, we do have to let the teachers know, hey look, dad's not here. So he does call my dad dad, and that's who he refers to him as. So that's why I kind of resonated with the, you know, him saying he doesn't have any.
Yeah.
I think just like from the teacher perspective and like approaching situations like y'all's and the authors, it's just, I think I just resonate like with you having to tell your son's teacher stuff like that, because like as a future teacher, I don't want to ever make my students not feel included with things like that, especially around like holidays and stuff, like Father's Day. Yeah, so I think that's just important to know, like, okay, well, this student doesn't have parents, maybe they're raised by their grandparents, but I think that's just, you're fine. I just lost my train of thought.
It's good for teachers to know.
Yes, I think it's just good for teachers to know in terms of like inclusion. But somebody else can go. I lost my train. That distracted me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think you're seeing more and more now of like schools getting rid of things like daddy-daughter dance. You know, like that was something that was super popular. You know, and now it's just more like a male figure dance. You know, maybe they don't even have a male figure, and it's just like a guardian dance. That's something that with my mentor teacher personally, like she always, when she sends things home, like she will tell the student, she knows their situation obviously, but she will just always say, make sure a guardian gets this. She won't, she never says, make sure your mom gets this, make sure your dad, she won't even say parents really. She will just say, make sure a guardian, or she'll say, make sure somebody in your house gets
like an
this.
adult at
Yeah.
home or something.
So, yeah, but the same, like, as I was reading that to you, I was like, because that does happen a lot, you know, where we just assume that people.
Everybody has a mom and dad at home.
Yeah, because he actually the other day went up and straight up somebody, they were talking about traits and how you get family traits, and the kid asked him what he got from his dad, and he goes, I don't have a dad.
Yeah.
But he said it so sassy.
Well, at least he's proud.
Yeah, he's proud about that one. But yeah, the importance of that, I found this one quote that he had said, it wasn't in the book, but he was talking about it. He said, he had the feeling of responsibility to share that story that he had lived. So I guess that comes into like letting other kids know, like, you're not alone, like, I've been through this.
All right, so I have a quote from the author in like a press conference because you know, this book has been one that's been challenged in a lot of different places. In some places, like some districts, they have banned it. But this is a quote from the author. When they asked him about it, he said, "I believe parents think they are protecting their kids from difficult truths or truths about which they're not familiar. Missing in that outrage is that their kids' peers are living the lives featured in those books. So by saying a book is inappropriate, they are saying that the other kids themselves are inappropriate." And I really like that quote because I remember, you know, our first book club that we did with The Hate You Give, you know, we kind of talked about, one of the questions I think Anaya asked is like, would we feel comfortable giving this, like using this book in our classrooms? And like, I know that I had said, you know, because of the language, maybe not, you know, but then I read this quote right here and talking about books being inappropriate. What it's representing is basically saying, like, if a kid is associated with that, then they're also inappropriate. So, so I've kind of changed my mind on how I feel now about these books. So my question was just simply, what are your thoughts on teaching a book like this in the classroom?
I think that's a good way to sum up our, like, the last book club that we have, just with that quote.
I think that's a good way to like sum up the course as a whole.
Yeah.
Like this whole class has been like challenging you to see the different side of these like banned books or like challenged books. And when you put it in like, that perspective, like it makes you feel guilty because like at the beginning of the semester I was like, there's no way I would teach these books. Like I feel like all of these books have great messages, but for the age range, I just didn't feel like they were appropriate for that time in their lives.
Yeah.
But when you put it that way, you feel guilty because now you just think about it as like, I'm singling out these children that do live these lives, and like their age has no effect.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if that's who they are and that's what their family is and that's the things that they've lived through, they could have lived through that at 5 years old, or they could have lived it at 25 years old. Like, it doesn't make a difference. So I think no age is really too young or too old to have these kinds of conversations. It's just how you
approach
the conversation and making the language that you use age appropriate. So I think, you know, my total takeaway and like how I feel about all of these books is that I would teach them, and I don't have a problem with any of them, and I think all of them were good recommendations, but I would just, you know, tread lightly with how I approach each one and make sure to keep my students' needs in mind.
I was gonna say something, but I forgot.
Okay.
It's that quote that blew everyone
Are
away.
we reading Chelsea's questions? I think she can just email to him.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Y'all want me to go with my second one?
Her
Yeah.
question.
Okay, so mine was just, did this novel change or challenge your perspective on substance use and families affected by it? If so, how? And if not, why not?
I mean, it didn't change like my views. I know a lot of people that have gone through that growing up with their families, so like I'm used to seeing it. It's kind of sad to say that. So for me, it wasn't like an eye-opener, but I can see how it would be for like students or somebody else that's reading it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like it probably changed it more so for the younger kids that are reading it than people who have, been around longer and seen what it does to families, especially with the perspective that it had of like, I think we all can understand how substance abuse can affect a kid. So, it didn't necessarily change it. I think it gave me maybe a little bit of a deeper understanding, and just also, I'll tell you what it did do is it made me further realize the importance of having something that you can do to cope with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like his escape was drawing. So like, but what if he wasn't able to do that? What if he couldn't do that? Where would he be at? So just being able to, if you're in situations, to find ways to express yourself, to get that, whatever emotions you're feeling, to get those out, and be expressive is important. So I think that's what I've learned from the book.
Yeah, especially like as teachers, if like a kid's background of their home life, like if you can figure out something that they're interested in and kind of go through there. I think one of the videos that came out when you were talking was one that we watched in one of our other classes was with the drumsticks, where the kid just kept tapping, and then the teacher was like, here's some drumsticks.
Yeah.
So just kind of finding like an alternative that they can use as an outlet.
Second question. Okay. Mine was, what specific aspect of the story do you feel was best elevated by the book's visual novel format? I would just say like the art aspect, because it's really hard to like visualize. Like if it was just a purely written book, like if someone like in piecing me together, I guess you could say, like it's hard to visualize what kind of art is being talked about if it's just like written. It's best if you can like actually see the art, and then see how it was like originally intended to be expressed. So
especially like with it being his outlet, and using that as we touched on earlier, using that as a graphic novel, because it's not just like stick figures that make him feel better. Like he's producing these artworks, and he's able to do it through the book.
Yeah.
is that it?
Do you want to answer from Chelsea? All right.
Yeah, we have our other
Okay.
class.
All right. Well, I think that is it for the Wobbegongs. Last book club. It's been a pleasure, friends, countrymen, what have you. See y'all next time.
Who's our official announcer?